Hey ladies and gents, welcome back to Alpha Reviews Podcast, the podcast where me and Franco Robson go down the alphabet, reviewing films as we do. Today, conveniently at B, we do Brokeback Mountain, and I'm so excited to share this episode with you all, because not only did we have AwardsWatch's Erik as a guest, we had the freaking writer and producer of Brokeback Mountain, Ossana, guest with us. It was more of an opportunity just to interview her. Of course, her co-writer for many years and her very good friend Larry McMurtry died very recently, and it was her first appearance since his death, so we were extremely grateful to have him, and we really want to make this episode to honour Larry McMurtry and his incredible work, and we sincerely thank Diana for coming on at the time she did. So please be respectful, but again, thank you for listening. Please enjoy the episode.
And also, I apologise for Franco's mic issues. It only goes on for 15 minutes, and I've tried drowning out as much as I can in an audition, but it's still not great. I did eventually mention it to him, and he did apologise, and he was actually really embarrassed about the whole thing, but you're just going to have to excuse it for 15 minutes. It's not that bad, really, but just in case you find it annoying, if you just want to skip to the 15-minute mark, then it's understandable.
Erik, I know that me and you both had something to say to Diana. Do you want to go first?
First, I'm obviously just honored to talk to you, but I just wanted to give you condolences over Larry last month, and I just appreciate you being here today.
Yeah, I say the same thing.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Yeah, it's hard, and to do it a month after his unfortunate passing, it means a lot to us, and we'll try and be careful of what we say, but we just really appreciate your time. And I think I speak for Franco as well.
Yeah, thanks. I when it comes to Brokeback, I still feel pretty passionate about it. So this is actually the first anything I've done since Larry passed away. So
it's a pleasure to talk to you. So just going into Brokeback, so just want to say, the reason why we want to talk to you is that poster behind Erik hasn't just been put there for this Zoom call. I wanted to.
No.
That was already there. I promise.
He's a huge fan, and me and Franco are also fans. But Brokeback, as its time of release and as the time you wrote, bearing in mind you wrote it in 1998, that was quite a brave move of you and Larry, because Brokeback was almost one of the first, if not the first, film to we had films with gay people in and gay characters, but Brokeback was one of the first to kind of show that any sort of relationship that isn't a heterosexual relationship can just be as pure and romantic and sincere. So I was just wondering, how did you even end up writing Brokeback?
Well, you probably know the story of me reading it in the New Yorker. My friend Mark Poirier we were all in Texas, and Mark and another writer friend, Joe, were working in Larry's bookstore, and we were mentoring them as writers. And Mark's room was right across the hall from mine. And he brought me the magazine, and he said, "There's a story in here, Diana, you ought to read." And that's all he said. He didn't tell me what it was or what it was about. I said, okay, well, and on his recommendation, I relied on that, So I had it on my bedside table, and I have a very difficult time sleeping, always, ever since I was a child. And I picked it up one night when I couldn't read, couldn't sleep, and I started reading it. And actually, as I was reading it, I was thinking, this is written so beautifully. This is a beautiful short story. Every word is perfect. And I didn't get to the part where the men are together in the tent. I got about, 2 pages in, and I thought, I've been writing Westerns for a couple of years now. I think I'm going to put this down. And I lay there, and I thought I still couldn't go to sleep. So I picked it back up and finished it. And when I got to the scene with the tent, I was just like, because what I realized, I saw the big picture right away, what this meant for these 2 young men in that time and in that place. And I had to find out how the story ended. So I kept reading, and I finished, and I was weeping, and I was exhausted at that point. So I fell right to sleep. And I woke up the next morning, and I thought, was that just one of those intense middle of the night things that happened? You know, how you're awake in the night and everything becomes larger. So I read it again before I went downstairs. And it was, if it was even more affecting the second time. And I took it downstairs and I said, Larry, there's a story in here I want you to read. He said, what is it? And I said, it's a short story. He said, I don't read short fiction. And I said, why not? And he said, because I can't write it. And I said, well, you're going to read this one. Take the magazine upstairs and read it. I was adamant, you know. So he came back down 20 minutes later and he was quiet, which he was never quiet. The man always had a comment about something. And I said, well, what do you think? What do you think? And he said, it's one of the best short stories I've ever read in the New Yorker since Flannery O'Connor, he said.
Wow.
And I said, what do you think about writing a screenplay with me? And I'm telling you, you know, this is a man who was contrary as could be, the most stubborn person I've ever known. I didn't expect him to say yes right away because he'd argued with me about whether the sun had come up. And he said, sure. And I said, okay, we need to write the author a letter and ask her to option it to us. So we sat right down. He typed up a letter on his typewriter. We sent it off to Annie. It was single page. It was like a fan letter. And about a week later, we got a letter back that said, I don't see a movie here, but have at it. I'll have my people get a hold of your people and we'll just go from there. And so that's how it came about, really.
So was it just instantly, as soon as you got the letter, you watching it straight away? Was there more of a process
Yes.
with writing it?
No, look, you've all read the story, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
That story. And mind you, the version that I read did not have the prologue. There was an italicized prologue that Annie had written a year later, sort of giving you a hint of what the story was about. And she sent it to me and Larry, and she was concerned that it needed that. And Larry and I both said, it doesn't need that. It doesn't need that. It's better if they go into this not expecting something specific, because it'll just slam up the side of the head. You know, it'll bring everything such clarity and yet confusion at the same time. But she kept it in there. But mind you, that was not the version we read. So when I read it cold. I didn't know until I got to the 10th scene that this was a story about two young men who'd fallen in love. And there was something about it immediately. I knew it was powerful. And I knew that it could touch people in ways they'd never been touched before about this particular subject. And I felt that its power was in how specific it was. It was specifically about two men who fell in love and their hardship and their challenges and their own homophobia. I just felt because of that, it was very powerful. And it was like the skeleton of this screenplay was right there. So, and then Larry and I had talked about it. One of the things I thought about as I was reading it, I kept wondering about the ripple effect of their homophobia, the fact that they wouldn't end up together, and how that affected all the people around them, and the sadness it brought so many people. It wasn't just the two of them. And you know, thinking about it on some level, you're thinking, well, they should have been together. They should have never gotten married. They should have. But that's not what happened. You can think that till you're blue in the face, and you have to remember the time and the place that this happened. So anyway, that's how the domestic part came about.
I've got more questions to ask Eric, but if you want to take it from here, I know you're keen.
No, one thing I just thought was fascinating, because I've read interviews with you and watched some, and the concept that for Annie, that she couldn't see it as a film, but obviously you could, is kind of what speaks to both you and Larry's ability to see things on a much larger scale. I mean, when I read it, it was extremely cinematic to me, but I also read it because I wanted to see I had my ideas. I was like, I want to see this. I want to see it on screen. I want to see it bigger and turned into something fleshed out and narrative. But yeah, the story itself was so evocative, and I have to feel that was your impetus for thinking, okay, this could be something more, because everything was there, and you just brought so much more to it.
At the beginning, when you read the descriptions of the young men, they're so perfect in such a short few words and very specific, and you envision them right away. Right away, you'd see them. And of course, I've been a voracious, obsessive reader all my life. And when I read, I imagine the characters, I picture them. And it's the same with writing. And I think Larry always did the same thing when he was writing. These characters were just as real or more so than people in his life. And that's how I feel when I'm writing. And so Ennis and Jack, they became, and through the years, they stayed that way, as if they were real people. I knew them inside and out. You know, you can make an argument, well, she's not gay, how would she know? Or she's not a man. You know what? If you're a writer, this is what writers do. They imagine characters, and they have to imagine them in such a way that they're convinced, that I'm convinced. And so for me, that was not difficult at all. And you know, when people would ask me that, I would say, look at Larry. Larry has written some of the most profound, interesting women in literature. He's a man. How would he know? You know, it's somewhere in his imagination. Because in real life, he's just like any other man. He's just as clueless as the next guy. He's just, you know, trying to find his way with women. But in his imagination, it's all there.
The biggest praise I can give Brokeback is that it is so just pure and organic. Things just happen. It's not really the main story isn't really told through dialogue. So I was just wondering, was Brokeback kind of like easy to write? Was the challenges? Was it kind of like straightforward? Did it have multiple routes and where you thought you could take the story?
When we started out writing, we wrote the story, just what was there, the scenes that were in the story. And then we took it and we talked about what we wanted to know. And what we wanted to know was about the women. And we wanted to know, I mean, and also when Annie would sometimes write a sentence or two about a scene, but it just spoke to us. For me, one of the perfect examples of that is when Ennis sends off the postcard, you know, to Jack. And Jack comes flying up in the pickup truck thinking that now they're going to be together. I thought, this has to be a scene. It's a 3-page scene because it so speaks to how Jack turns after that. He realizes that this is not what's going to happen. And talk about a broken heart. I mean, this just devastates him. So we needed to see that and feel that. It was hard to write, just only in the sense of the emotion involved, you know. But it was never difficult for me. I was excited every morning to get up and get back to it. It took us about 3 months to write the first draft, and it didn't waver after that.
So there's such a timeless quality to it, and very much to that scene, because it doesn't matter if it's 1963 Wyoming or if it's 2021 and smartphones. If you are hoping to be engaged in a relationship and you have this beacon, this glimmer of hope, you will drop everything and everyone and you will go to it. And it just that is never ending. That is, the stories of romance like that are never ending from the beginning of time. It's always universal.
Well, in the one sense, I'll speak to universal here quickly. Maybe maybe that's kind of the rationalization that straight people had when they went to see it, or men, for liking it, or being affected by it. And that's fine. But the fact is, and everybody, they're going to take what they will from a film or a book when they read it or see it, that from based upon through the lens of their own experiences, right? But the reason this story is so powerful is that it's about these two men who fall in love. It's not Romeo and Romeo. It's Ennis and Jack. It's so different from that kind of a story. It has very specific aspects, and if it didn't have those, it wouldn't be as affecting as it is. If you think about movies that have affected you or stories that have affected you, it's not the generality of it or the universality of it. It's the emotion, whatever that emotion happens to be. The way I view the world, and indulge me, is that we're all connected. We are all, whether we like it or not, for good or for bad, as human beings, we are all connected. And these are the kind of stories and the effect that it had on people, men and women, everyone, straight, gay, whatever, speaks to that. So,
Franco, would you like a moment just to make yourself comfortable? It's painful watching you wriggle about there, mate.
No, it's fine.
I had to hold in, because you look like you're falling off your chair, and I was like, "Oh no, this is not going well."
Oh, sorry.
It's okay, it's okay, mate. Are you whereabouts is your mic? I think it's rubbing against your shirt, mate.
I'll leave it.
Okay, mate. There we go. Sorry. There we go. So in terms of Brokeback, it has really found its audience, and the people who love it really sing its praise. But something that's always, since I watched Brokeback and I became such a fan of it and I did my research, something that's always really bothered and upset me is that, like, not only did it lose Best Picture at the Oscars, it's also kind of grown this reputation as the gay cowboy movie. It's become a phrase to say, "Oh, don't go all Brokeback on me." And Family Guy parodied it briefly in one of their episodes. And I'm just wondering, does it kind of bother you that some people are just so narrow-minded that they can't see Brokeback for what it is?
no. I mean, remember when all the jokes started before any of the award shows or whatever, and when all the word of mouth was going about?
Yes.
Larry and I laughed because, first of all, they're not cowboys. They're wannabe cowboys. They're ranch hands. They're sheep herders, but the point is that they're rural. They're from the country. They're not your typical television film presented gay men. They're not. They, you wouldn't be able to look at them and know they're gay. It's not. It wasn't. They weren't stereotypes. Let me put it like that. And the joking, it really bothered Heath for some reason. He had taken it so seriously, his role and his acting. It really bothered him. And I told him, honey, I said, don't let it bother you. Just be happy that there's a conversation about it. People that go see it will understand it's not the gay cowboy movie. It is what it is. It's powerful and affecting and important. And you're a part of that, No, it never bothered me. In fact, I found some of it funny, but that's just because I knew what it was. I knew what I'd written. I knew what was on the screen, and it would, no matter what, it would always be there. The story would always be there, certainly, that Annie wrote. But now the film, it's in the National Registry, so it'll always be there.
And I think too, even with the jokes and parodies that came through the season, it gave the film a visibility that it might not have had. I mean, it made $80 million in the United States. That was crazy. That was a huge number. And it got there by interest and by word of mouth and by actually overcoming all of that instead of succumbing to it. So it was sort of like a even bad news is good news kind of thing. It was all everybody talked about that entire time of the year.
Every time the award season comes back, every time, this year too, there are articles and stories and people talking about how it didn't win Best Picture. It's the worst Best Picture winner in the history of the Oscars. It comes back every single year. And what's interesting, it actually has become more famous because it didn't win Best Picture.
That happens a lot.
Yeah, and it was disappointing, of course. For me, it was more disappointing for all the people that worked on it, because the crew, they were so committed, and the actors, they worked so hard, and they were so determined to do the best job they could do, all of them. And for me, that was the loss.
Yeah. Am I correct in saying when it lost Best Picture, you weren't as surprised as maybe you were meant to be?
No, I wasn't as surprised. And I can give you an example why. About 2 weeks before the Oscars, Paul Haggis had an Oscar nominee party at his home, and all the nominees go, and and then other people show up at the party, and Clint Eastwood was there, and Steven Spielberg. I'm a huge fan of Clint Eastwood's films. And Unforgiven is one of my favorite films. That's one I use when I teach screenwriting. I use it as an example. I use the transition and the anti-hero aspects of it. Anyway, I said to Paul, I'd really like to meet him. He said, okay. So he started walking me over, and he looked at me and he said, Diana, I have to tell you, he hasn't seen the movie.
Oh no.
At that point, all the votes had been in. It was, that was it. All the voting was over. And it felt like somebody punched me in the stomach. I knew then it wouldn't win Best Picture.
Really?
And I felt, and later I was irate because I thought, surely he voted. How could he vote when he didn't see all the movies? That's just, because I'm fiendish. Larry always called me a completist. He said, when you're given a task, Diana, you do it all, and then some. And if I'm given I watch all the movies. And, I was a judge for Film Independent a couple of years, and I have to watch. I mean, I'm up at 3 a.m. trying to get all these films watched, 170 movies. But I was angry. I was annoyed, not so much because I knew it was because he didn't want to see the archetype that he had of a masculine male in that position, right? I just thought this is silly and immature. So at that point, I pretty much knew. I know.
I think some people who are maybe a fan of Crash, and this isn't a podcast to talk down on Crash. It's some people like it, some people respect it, and I know you're friends with Paul Haggis, aren't you?
Not really. Paul's had some real issues in the last 10 years or so, right, Erik?
Yeah.
Some real issues.
For sure.
And I was friendly with Paul all through the awards season, because we were all clumped together and at the same, events and everything. And I was always very direct with Paul. But no, we weren't particularly friends. No.
Oh, fair enough. Okay. Well, it's just with the Crash is just so the opposite approach of Brokeback Mountain, and Brokeback Mountain won everywhere, and then to win at the Oscars to a film like Crash, it's hard to not say it wasn't down to homophobia in the voting.
Well, of course it was. And so, and anybody that says any different is in denial. I mean, it's so obvious. Ernest Borgnine said, who was a fine actor, by the way. He said, if John Wayne would, if he were alive today, he'd be rolling over in his grave. Well, I thought if he was alive today, he wouldn't be in his grave, but he was trying to say, you know what I mean? It was just like, what? No, there are, I know there are people today that have not seen it because it's about two men who fall in love. But that, to me, I don't care. It's their loss. It's a profound, affecting film, and it affects people who are outrageously heterosexual. Raging heterosexuals. It affects them in spite of themselves, because it's the power of that story. That story has immense power.
I think some people, like you refer to as raging homosexuals, I think whenever they hear
Raging
that,
heterosexuals.
I'm so sorry, raging
That's okay.
heterosexuals, they kind of almost, as soon as they hear about a film being about two gay lovers, I think they almost instantly think that it's going to be a film that tries to like preach to them about like why you should be gay, because they have this like very fixed mindset that it can only be one thing. And I think, and especially in Brokeback's case, if it's so sad, because Brokeback's so much more than that, and it's got so much more to say, and it's just, yeah.
Well, that was part of the beauty of it. It wasn't a story trying to convince you one way or the other of anything. It was just to tell the most compelling, convincing story with convincing characters that it could tell. That was it. And you're going to go to it and come away with it what you will. We weren't trying to make a statement or anything. We just wanted to tell a great story, a really fine story that would move people. So,
I mean, I guess there's two best pictures. There's the Oscars best picture, and then there's the best picture. And in terms of the film that's had the best legacy, that people look up to the most and is inspired by the most, I think Brokeback Mountain wins by miles in that category.
I have some great stories about people that didn't know what it was going to be about, or had heard it was the gay cowboy movie and then went to see it, and they're devastated, It's just, but I have great stories like that. Our publicist, for example, we were in Toronto, and she said, "I have to see your film before I'll agree to represent you, represent the film." I said, "Fine." So we went to the theater and we saw the film. And on the way, we ran into Jake, who's walking down the street, and Amanda goes, "Jake, I can't wait to see you making out with Heath Ledger." And of course, Jake got beet red. And, how do you respond to that? So we went to the film and we're sitting there. And I remember about a third of the way into the movie, I feel her. She's already starting to cry. And of course, by the time the movie was over, she was like a puddle. I had to sort of carry her out into the lobby. And she was like talking to herself. "Oh my God, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? This is the best picture. This is the best picture. Oh my God. Oh my God, Diana," like that. And then she said, "My brother's gay." And, this is so many people. My son is gay. I'm gay, and I only came out after I saw the film. A whole group of wonderful fans came to Arizona to see me and Larry when we were here one weekend. And they wanted to visit with us and talk to us about the movie. The most surprising thing that they told us was how it had spurred them to have lives. One young man had been living in his basement for 36 years, his mother's basement. He said, "I'm in a relationship now. We have an apartment. We're thrillingly happy." How it made them feel like, "I can't waste any more time. I have to live my life, whatever that means." And for us, that was so fulfilling. It made me feel so wonderful. Like it had really meant something. The film had really affected people in a good way.
It has a
Very
legacy
touching.
that is still active today.
And I'm glad about that. When we went on the tour with the film for Q&As and everything, I said, "I'm ready. Bring it on. You ask me whatever you want." And when we went to the Writers Guild and we had a screening there, and we had a screening for the LGBTQ folks. There's a club, part of the Writers Guild, just specifically those writers. And so we had a screening for them, and then we had the screening for everybody after that. But it was those people that asked us, "What makes you think there's nobody that's gay on this film? What makes you think that you can tell this story effectively?" Right? And I said, "Well, as a matter of fact, we had gay rodeo cowboys. They were wranglers. They were gay. And two people on the film came out to me while it was being shot. And that's when I said, and by the way," and then I pointed at Larry and I said, "Here's the man who's written all these women characters." I said, "He knows them in and out in his imagination, but he's just as clueless as the next guy." And of course, that broke the ice, and that ended that. right? So
Eric, this is an interview, Diana, but I just want to ask from your perspective, because you've been keeping up with the Oscars for a long, long time, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm much older than you, Benji, if that's what you're trying to say. No, yes, absolutely. This since I was like 5 years old, and watching with my mom, and I've told this story many times that, getting to the point of a gay film maybe winning Best Picture, that was like, here is the convergence of everything like in my life all at the same time happening. So, and I had given so much emotional investment into that, not only just because I love the film, but because I just wanted this history moment. I wanted this moment, and it didn't happen. And it was just like this kind of thing that it really broke me. It broke my connection with the Oscars for quite a long time. And I took the facade off of what I thought that they were versus what it really was. But ultimately, that kind of just fell by the wayside because, like I said, this is a story that has a legacy that few films get to have. Its impact is still there. And this was definitely a time still when, if you were a straight actor playing a gay character, you could get sidelined or blacklisted, and that never happened for Jake Gyllenhaal or Heath Ledger. It was actually great for both of their careers. And everything since then, I mean, I really look at things as like pre-Brokeback and post-Brokeback when it comes to films and characters and subjects. And it'll never not be a watershed moment. And yes, every year, every Oscars, it will inevitably come into play in the conversation. And again, that's just because its impact is so lasting. But yeah, I mean, I was never, closeted or anything, so it was not like I needed something to help me. But like Diana said, I saw so many people that felt seen, and it allowed them to be more open. This
it
was
was
coming
liberating.
absolutely. This
And it
was
still is.
It still is. It's still exactly that. It isn't like homophobia is gone and cured and not a thing anymore. So we still need stories like this.
Well, and I mean, look, the fact that this is about rural homophobia, and Ennis is so consumed with his homophobia, it just practically destroyed him.
Yeah.
What a tragedy. I've had young people say things to me like, "Why do the gay people always have to die in the film?" And I said, "They don't. They don't always have to die, and that's not the point of this movie." And I said it's important for young people today, gay people, straight, to see this because it speaks to the history, the road that the gay movement has taken. What a struggle it was. And a lot of that struggle was internal, people not admitting to themselves that this was their sexual orientation. They were born this way. It's okay. You need to take the next step. So in that regard, for me, you can't really look ahead until you've looked back on history. You can't, unless you're fully informed, you can't go forward, no matter what the subject, and especially a subject like this. I just, and I didn't say this at the beginning, but when I read that story, I felt like I'd been struck by lightning. I became like an obsessed person. I wanted everybody in the world to read it. And then I went, wait a minute, the best way to do this is a film. That way everybody in the world can see it. If I can get it made into a movie. And once Larry and I finished our first draft, he just handed it off to me. He said, look, this is a great script. It will find its way. And he just kind of left it up to me and said, I'm going to go write a novel. And that's what he did when I was on set. He said, I'm not going to the set. That's boring as hell. I'm going to write a novel. I'm going to stay home and write a novel, you know. But I really was. I just felt it was so important. And trying to articulate at that point why it was so important, I couldn't really do it. I just knew in my gut that this was something powerful and affecting, and that if people only saw it, you know, they might have a shift in terms of the one word that I used to describe the film is compassion. Compassion for people whose lives are not like yours, no matter what the story. Like Minari, for example.
Yeah.
Those people's lives aren't like a lot of people's, but you have compassion for them. You know, and even the movie Parasite, you know, that movie, and even Judas and the Black Messiah, which I watched that late at night, and I went to bed so angry. I was so mad. It brought back all these feelings that I'd had in the 60s and 70s about, you know, my indignant compassion, you know, about the civil rights movement and the stuff that was happening. It just brought all those feelings back. And the next day I was so thankful for that, to feel all that passion again, and to sympathize, to feel, you know, to feel all of that. So, you know, if a film moves you, a book moves you, I feel like it's done its job, whatever direction that is.
Because you like you were mentioning about how liberating Brokeback was for gay men all around the world. It was also, I mean, I'm personally heterosexual, but when I watch Brokeback, the reason I love Brokeback so much, it's amongst my favorite films. When I watch it, I must feel like liberated. Like I watch it and I think I don't want to live by the standard quo of like being a man and all toxic masculine. I just want to be myself. And Brokeback really does just kind of I don't know if you've been told this before, but it can resonate with basically anybody for that reason.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I completely agree. Yeah, I think it's powerful, and I've had friends tell me occasionally, they go, Diana, look what you've done. Look what you've done. I said, well, you know, all I did was write it and produce it. I didn't, the film does it. It just, you know, it's like writing a short story or a novel. Once it's completed, you know, you have this kind of you're sad that you're leaving your characters, they're leaving your life. But then you realize that it's its own thing, and it's its own business. It has its own business in the world. Doesn't belong to you anymore.
Yeah.
You know, that film belongs to the world now, and I'm perfectly happy with that. I'm sorry. I know I'm really intense. I get told that all the time, but
no, that's very, it's just all very meaningful in a good way. It's all very meaningful and sentimental. So just kind of going back to Brokeback within the film as itself. Obviously, as you mentioned, you produced it. Was that always the plan, or did you just kind of find yourself there at some point?
no, both Larry and I thought we would produce it, but when it came down to making the deal with the studio, that was a long, drawn out affair.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't want me as a producer. They said, and it was like I had to audition to be the producer. And here I'd lived with this thing for 8 years. I'd been pushing it up this mountain. I've been climbing Brokeback Mountain for 8 years, and I had to audition. Which, fine, okay. Let me tell you what I've done. You know, I have 35 hours of on-set film experience. You know, as a producer. And I don't know, you can talk to my crews that have worked with me. They love me. They're always wanting to work with me again. I still hear from them. And I've lived with this story. I know these characters inside and out. I could recite the script to you by heart, you know? And what it finally came down to was Larry said, we were on the phone, and they said, well, if we don't have so-and-so be a producer, it won't get made. And Larry said, fine. And he went, click, hung up the phone. And 3 days later, they were calling our attorneys trying to make the deal again. And it was, you know, one of our lawyers that, demanded that I be a producer, and not just a producer, but the first position producer. So I have my lawyer to thank for that. But it was the filming was a real exercise in I guess misogyny, really. I was the I was the only, other than the production designer, I was the only above the line woman, and I got ignored mostly, and just kind of like this, except for the actors. The actors came to me all the time. I didn't go to them. Aang's notorious for not talking to the actors once he starts filming. And so, they didn't know if they were doing a good job, a bad job, an indifferent job. And Heath especially needed a lot of reassurance. And so he would talk to me about, his scenes and the character. And Jake would do the same thing. Jake, they were very different as actors. Jake will make it different every time. Every take, he'll try it a little different. He might switch up the dialogue, which aggravated Heath to no end. He stuck clearly to the script, and he wanted it to stay that way. But Heath never wavered. Once that camera, the first time it rolled, he became Ennis, and every time action, he became Ennis. He was always Ennis. He was always the same. He didn't falter, he didn't waver. But when Aang yelled cut, he became his cheerful, joyful, childlike person again, except once. And that was the shirt scene, when he finds the shirts in the closet. We shot day for night there. I mean, it was night for day. We shot at nighttime. It was supposed to be daytime. A lot of lights everywhere. And he was upstairs and I was downstairs with the monitor. And he did the first take. And of course, it just, ripped him up. And he came downstairs and he said, how did I do? How did I do? And one of the other, the exec producers was there, Michael Costa. He was telling me something, and somehow he construed this that maybe he wasn't doing it the best he could do or something. He went running out of the house into the dark, and I was like, oh my God. And you could tell he was just overwhelmed. And I ran after him and I said, are you okay, Heath? He said, I just need to be alone. I just need to be alone. So he was gone for 30 minutes. It was pitch black. It's like midnight, and we're all wondering if he's going to be okay. And he came back and he did another couple of takes and got through it. But it was like he had to get a grip on himself. He was so overwhelmed emotionally by that scene, because that scene, it's like the anticlimax. It's the scene where the character realizes what he's lost. It's when Ennis knows that, he knows that he loved Jack. He knew that. That was clear to him. But when he finds those shirts and his shirt is inside Jack's, he realizes how much he was loved. I'm gonna cry.
Yeah.
And what he'd lost. And that overwhelmed him as the amazing young man that he was. But he came back and pulled himself together and did a couple of takes. And he did, if you look at that scene, it just rips your heart out.
It's an incredibly sentimental scene.
Oh, the thing is, Ben, it's not sentimental. It's hard and it's unsentimental and it's realistic and it's pain. It's full of sentiment, but it's not sentimental.
Okay,
Yeah.
I understand that. So it's obvious to me by you talking about Heath and Jake that they were both incredibly passionate about Brokeback, but am I correct in saying it was a real pain to get? I believe it was Heath Ledger, wasn't it, in particular, was really hard to get hold of for the film?
Well, we suggested Heath early on and they thought he wasn't macho enough. What is that? Where did that come from? I think it was just some excuse to not use him. And when it came down to it, the other actor who'd committed, that was in August, I think, before we start shooting the next spring. You know, I had a gut feeling that he was going to back out. I just felt it, and I thought, because a lot of actors had committed and backed out of that particular role, the Ennis role. It was easy to get Jack. I wasn't sure what the problem was. Larry said he thinks a lot of the actors, representatives, were dissuading them because they felt it would mark them, you know, for life. And I just kept saying, a smart actor is going to come along. A smart actor, he's going to see the value in this role, and he will jump right on board. Well, in December, I got a call from the studio head who said the other actor had backed out, but don't tell anybody, because I don't want people to think, you know, he refused Aang, or he rejected Aang. And I was like, what? That doesn't even make sense. So as soon as that happened, I got on the phone with Keith's agent. I called him, I hung up, and I went, oh. And I said, can you get the script to him? And he said, yes, because he'd read it. And so he got him the script, and he and Naomi Watts read it on the airplane on the way home to Australia. She read it first. And he told me when he on set, he said, you know, after Naomi read it, she was jumping up and down on the bed, telling me all the reasons I had to do this movie. And so I read the script, and he said, I would have rowed a boat halfway around the world to see Aang, to be in this film. So he understood it immediately. He understood how powerful it was and what it meant. He was, you know, he was so grateful and thankful. He told me it was the most beautiful script he'd ever read in his life. You know, and of course, that made me feel wonderful. I thought, he gets it. He's got passion. And that's what it takes, I think, you know.
It's and empathy. I think the thing that is the strongest element, and why, you know, you can say you're a woman, you're not a gay man, how can you write this? You have empathy, and you understand that that is the core of an audience being able to understand a character is if they have
Right.
empathy as well.
Well, like I said at the beginning, we're all connected.
Yeah.
I don't care what you say, or whether you like it or not. You know, I believe that we're all connected, you know, and I'm not judgmental. Let me put it like that. I'm not even judgmental in real life. I try to look at the big picture when I meet someone. I want to, you know, everything about them. I try very hard to not take a lot personally, because you never know where someone's coming from, what they've experienced. I just don't. One of the best compliments I felt I could give Larry, I listened to a podcast that Larry and I had done in 1994. They turned an interview we did into a podcast, and it was this podcast. And I listened to it shortly after he passed away. And they asked Larry if he could describe his work with one word, and he said, imagination. And I said, non-judgmental. He never condescended to his characters in any of his books. You know, not the bar waitress, not the guy that ran his truck drunk through the wall of the honky tonk. He loved them all. I feel that story, the power of that story too, is it's not judging. That's what I mean about it not preaching. It's not judging those characters. It's presenting them in all their rawness and flaws. And you feel for them, and even in spite of yourself. You can't help it. If you have any humanity about you, anybody with a heart.
So so is it fair to say then that you and Larry, not only did you think that an amazing screenplay could be made out of Brokeback Mountains, and did you almost feel a personal responsibility to get it out there because you know how powerful it could be for people?
I did. Larry didn't. You know, he just was like, okay, we'll do this, and I'm moving on. And he just said, Diana, it's a beautiful script. It will find its way. And he said to somebody describing me once, he said, Diana is eccentric in her relentlessness. He said, I know that because I've lived with her for 20 years. I know, this was like 20 years ago. He said, that's how she is. She's eccentric in how relentless she is. And I was relentless about getting that film made.
Larry strikes me, from talking about him, obviously I never knew him, but he strikes me as very kind of straightforward and professional. But then you almost have the emotional side of it, so you kind of complement each other well.
Yeah, we complemented each other really well. When people describe us, as our representative just told me this yesterday, he said, Diana, people ask me all the time about yours and Larry's relationship. He said, it's hard to explain. They're best friends, but they're like siblings. They love each other so deeply, and they're so loyal to one another and committed to one another in every way. We would, when we were, especially when we did book tours, we would finish each other's sentences, even in meetings, professional meetings. And so, it was clear we were sort of on the same page about most everything. Although when we disagreed passionately, and we didn't make any bones about it. We do it in front of people or whatever, but we would always come around. There was never any animus or bad feelings between us about anything, and I'm not sure how or why that happened, but I feel very fortunate to have had him in my life. And he said the same thing to me just, before he became ill.
Oh, bless him. So, sorry, I don't even know what to take it.
Eric, it's okay, it's all right.
Eric, do you have anything to say?
No, this has been pretty wonderful to listen to you, Diana, and these stories. These are things that I've read and heard about, but it's always so nice to have that direct first person experience and conversation about it. So I'm honored that you're here talking to us about something that came out 15 years ago, but it's here we're here, and from multiple generations too. Ben is a different generation than I am, and you from me, so it speaks so much to the reach and the impact.
I think anyone with an open mind can watch Brokeback and really appreciate it for what it is. I think
you can watch it with a closed mind and have it open your mind.
Right, and
true.
that to me, I loved giving the screenplay to friends of mine who had no idea what it was about, and then get their reaction afterwards. I loved it because it just confirmed that what I was doing was important and meaningful. I had a good friend who was in the military. Erik, you may have heard this story. He's a very good friend, a very smart guy. And he wanted to read us the script, one of my scripts. So I gave him that one. I didn't tell him what it was about. And he came back to me and he said, Diana, he said, that's a really good script. He said, but I have to tell you something. He said, I learned a lot from that script. He said, I said, like what? And he said, well, I didn't realize that gay people feel the same way that we do. And that startled me. He didn't realize that when gay people were in love, their love feels like love, the way that love is supposed to feel. He never knew that. And that just did him a 180. To me, that was, and I was like, yes.
That's the thing that can break the phobias and the isms down, is when you can finally see the person as just a human being, where you have not seen before.
Human being. That's important. That's why I say we're all connected. We're human beings. We're all connected. Yeah. Because when you meet someone, right away, you the first thing you say, well, it's a man or a woman, and they're a human being. And then you begin to learn more about them, but first and foremost, they're human.
I wish, because I think I genuinely do believe that most people, even like Erik said, even if they're coming from it from a closed mind, if they're forced to watch for whatever reason, I feel like it really can open their mind. And I wish not just with Brokeback, but any film like Brokeback that's come out since, like Moonlight, for example. I wish more people would kind of give it a chance and allow it to open their mind. Because as an example, it happened really recently to me and Franco. I won't say names because I don't want to get anyone into trouble or us into trouble. But an adult figure in our lifetimes, I told them that we were meeting you, and he just like laughed and was like, "Oh, I don't know what to say to that." And it's like, you just don't get it, do you?
That's, and that's, I'm not offended or anything, because again, it's their loss. It's not my loss. I feel lucky. I was lucky to come on that story. I was so fortunate to have something like that come into my life and have the privilege of pursuing that, that Annie let us do that. We optioned it with our own money. We paid $10,000 to get the option, and we ran with it. That was a real spec script. Nobody paid us to write that. We had to pay to write it. So, in that regard, it was a big risk too, And as far as people, I'm so honored that anybody sees the film. By any of you having seen the film, I feel honored by that. And thank you. I love the fact that it caused a lot of people to ask questions, to raise questions in their mind. When I go to the movies, I want to see a story maybe I don't know anything about. I want to learn sometimes from film. What is the point otherwise? You can be entertained with something, light and frivolous. That's great. And I am too. But I want to learn. I mean, even a movie like Minari or Parasite or Judas and the Black Messiah, young people don't know those stories. That film was done so well and so effectively. The acting was spot on. That script was excellent. The cinematography, it gave me the same feelings I had all those years ago. So in my mind, I felt like it was great. It was a great movie, and so many people could learn from it.
And I think that's the biggest reward Brokeback has. It really has had that effect. People still ask questions from it. People still watch it, and people still learn from it.
And I'm happy that people were disturbed after they saw it, because it forced them, in spite of themselves, to look at things that they hadn't really looked at in any depth. I'm glad about that. I'm happy about that. I'm fine arguing with people about it. They can't offend me, because I feel like so much of what they say and express about it says so much about who they are.
Diana, we're really grateful for your time. We are coming up to the 1 hour mark, but
yes, I see. I'm looking at the clock, and my little dog is out there. I can hear him scratching. One of them scratching at the door.
Oh,
yeah, my cat's scratching at the door.
You have good cats, don't you, Eric? They come bring you.
Yes. Normally they're in here with me, but I kick them out.
We just wanna also just quickly congratulate you, and Larry is not with us anymore, but congratulate you on Good Joe Bell as well.
Oh yeah,
that's an achievement.
That was difficult. 4 years of agony too. And just quickly, I'll tell you, we got 4 minutes. Once we wrote the script, and we wrote it for Cary Fukunaga. What you'll see in the film, they might not like me saying this, but we had no involvement with the director or the casting or anything. It just languished for 4 years. So what you see is not, it's changed. It's changed pretty radically from the script. There's so much more of Joe in there than Jaden, which disappointed us, because it's because of Jaden's story that Joe, what happens to Joe? It's if you see that, you'll come to understand a lot. And it was a lot of our intention was to honor Jaden and his life and his death, and ultimately Joe's too, but Jaden was the focus when we wrote the script.
I don't know. I know it's had a release, not theatrically, but with festivals. Unfortunately, just due to being in the UK and restriction, I've not been able to get an opportunity. But let me tell you something. I am super excited to see it. Nonetheless, just to see another feature film that you and Larry have written, because if Brokeback's anything to go by, I think you two are just one of the best writing pairings I've ever seen.
Oh, I really I appreciate that. Well, I think it's, again, because we're not judgmental. We never could be. It's, we're all human
Yeah.
when it comes right down to it.
Well, Diana, we thank you so much, and we'll let you loose, and we'll let your dogs come say hello.
Thank you, Ben, for your interest, and and thanks, Eric. It's nice to see you.
Yes, thank you so much, Diana.
And with that, ladies and gents, that rounds out our episode on Brokeback Mountain. Again, thank you so much for listening. Join us next time, where we'll be doing, let's just say, Brokeback's big evil rival.